I should have trusted my gut when I arrived at the campsite that October evening. My name is Gareth Mitchell, and I'm 34 years old software engineer from Georgia. And the story I'm about to tell you still haunts me. So much so that if I hear anyone whistle, I burst into tears. This all happened in 2018 when I was 26 years old, when I decided to take a break from my hectic life. When I arrived at campsite, the ranger at the station had given me an odd look when I mentioned where I was heading, Deep Hollow Trail, about 15 miles into the Appalachian backcountry.
You going alone?
He'd asked. When I nodded, he just said,
Be careful out there.
in a way that made my skin prickle. But I was desperate to get away. My divorce had just been finalized. I'd lost my job, and I needed silence. I needed to be somewhere my phone didn't work, where no one could reach me. Deep Hollow promised exactly that. The hike in was beautiful. Fall colors blazed through the canopy, and by the time I reached the clearing beside Widow's Creek, I felt lighter than I had in months. I set up my tent as the sun dipped below the ridge, started a fire, and heated up some chili. The darkness came fast, the way it does in the mountains, but I didn't mind. I sat by the fire with my book, listening to the creek babble over stones. That's when I first heard the whistling. It was distant, maybe a quarter-mile away, moving through the trees to the east. A simple tune, just 5 or 6 notes repeated over and over. At first, I assumed it was another hiker, but something about it felt wrong. The notes were too perfect, too rhythmic, and they didn't seem to be getting closer or farther away, just circling, always at the same distance. I called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded small in the vast darkness. The whistling stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the creek seemed quieter. Then it started again, but this time from the west, the exact same tune. The exact same distance away. My rational mind tried to explain it. Maybe the mountains were creating an echo, or there were multiple hikers. But echoes don't change direction. I built up my fire and tried to focus on my book, but I couldn't concentrate. Every few minutes, the whistling would stop and start again from a new direction. North, south, east, always at the same distance, like something was circling my camp just beyond the reach of the firelight. Around midnight, I gave up and retreated to my tent. I lay in my sleeping bag, heart hammering, telling myself I was being ridiculous. Then I heard footsteps. Not animal footsteps, human ones. Heavy boots crunching through the underbrush, moving in a slow circle around my tent. They take 3 or 4 steps, pause for a long moment, then continue. And with each pause came that whistling. Now close enough that I could hear it was slightly off key in a way that made my teeth ache. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent flap. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "This isn't funny." The footsteps stopped. The whistling stopped. I swept my flashlight beam through the trees, and that's when I saw them. Boot prints in the soft earth around my campsite. Fresh prints, deep and deliberate, forming a perfect circle around my campsite. But what made my blood freeze was that the prints stopped about 10 feet from my tent. There were no prints leading away. It was as if whoever made them had simply vanished mid-stride. I didn't sleep. I sat up all night with my knife in my hand, flashlight beside me, listening. The whistling never returned. But around 3 a.m., I heard something else. A sound like fingernails dragging slowly across the outside of my tent. I screamed and slashed at the nylon with my knife, tearing a hole. But there was nothing there. When dawn finally broke, I packed up faster than I've ever done anything in my life. And that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Scratched into the bark of the oak tree beside my tent were words, rough and fresh. "You heard me." I ran. I didn't hike. I ran the entire 15 miles back to the ranger station, my pack bouncing painfully against my back, my lungs burning. The same ranger was there, and when he saw my face, he just nodded slowly, like he'd expected it.
You heard the whistling.
He said. It wasn't a question. I could barely speak, but I managed to nod. He sighed and poured me a cup of coffee with shaking hands.
Had a hiker go missing out there in '98. Michael Brennan. They found his camp, his gear, everything. Never found him. But people who camp at Deep Hollow sometimes report hearing whistling, and those who hear it.
They trailed off, looking uncomfortable. What? I demanded. Those who hear it, what? He met my eyes.
They always come back. Brennan didn't just hear it, he answered it. Rangers found his journal. Last entry said he'd been whistling back, trying to communicate. That's when they think he left his camp and followed it into the woods.
My hands trembled around the coffee cup. I thought about how close I'd come to unzipping that tent, to following those footsteps, to discovering what was making that sound. "What is it?" I whispered. The ranger shook his head.
Don't know. Don't want to know. But I'll tell you this. In the 3 years I've worked here, 5 people have reported hearing it. You're the 6th. And you're the first who didn't go back out there the next night to investigate.
I never went camping alone again. And sometimes, usually around October, when I'm lying in bed in my locked apartment in the city, I'll hear it. Just faintly, just for a moment, those same 6 notes, whistled perfectly just outside my window. I never look. I learned my lesson at Deep Hollow. Some things don't want to be found, and some things are patient enough to wait until you make the mistake of trying to find them. I just pray I never get curious enough to whistle back.